So I'm going to talk a little bit about some management options that are available, just to give you some ideas, and then how to put those, tie what Mitch talked about earlier tonight and tie those together into a drought plan. It's going to be unique for every ranch. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what it's going to rain, and I can't tell you what you need to do to mitigate for rain, but hopefully I can give you some ideas of things you can do or you may want to do. So what we know so far from what Mitch has talked to us about, we know where we're kind of sitting in terms of drought. We know from the drought monitor where we are. We know what our management is before drought, and maybe some ideas of how to change our management to prepare for the next drought, based on stocking and rotational grazing. We know how rangeland responds to drought, how that responds to the timing of precipitation and that forage production, how much forage production we're going to lose this year already, possibly because of how dry it is. And then he talked a little bit about trigger dates and what those trigger dates are and some management decisions we can put to those. But I'm going to go into that a little bit more. So this is kind of what I'll talk about. I'll talk about our livestock and how it responds to drought, or kind of things we got to think about when we're managing livestock through drought. And then go through those management options, and then kind of tie it all together with those trigger dates and what those management options are, and so you can make your best decision, and you can make a decision promptly and adequately for your operation. During drought, the energy is the most limiting factor in drought when you have a normal stocking rate. So if you don't change your stocking rate, that energy is your most limiting factor. And when you don't have enough energy for your cattle, you have delayed puberty or suppressed estrus and ovulation, and a decrease in body condition. Those grasses can also have vitamin and protein content can be limited, and so the biggest thing is getting enough energy into our cattle with feed, whether that's forage that's on the ground or forage that we feed them. So we have two options. We can change our stocking rate, or we can buy forage for our animals. Or we can change the nutritional demand of our animals through early weaning or something like that. So there is a handout going around about body conditioning, and there's also a website where you can go online and learn about body conditioning through the UNL learning modules. But we want to maintain our cattle, and most of us know this. So you want to maintain the body condition of the cattle. It just describes the fatness of the cattle. And cows, running age cows, we typically maintain them at a body condition score 5, and heifers we maintain at a body condition score 6. And you can kind of see the difference here. Your handout will walk you through your differences, but a body condition score 5, basically, you're not going to be able to see those ribs, and unless the animal has been shrunk, you're not going to. Only firm pressure is going to be able to feel the spine, and it's not going to be noticeable to the eye. And then the 6 is just fuller, typically just fuller in the back and in the front. In the brisket, you're starting to get a little fat in the brisket in a body condition score 6. So skip ahead. And then you can, if you're in a drought situation or you're not getting enough energy into your cattle, you can lose condition and go to a body condition score 4. And then you can tell she's just bonier, right? So you know she's lost condition. So when we get to a body condition score 4, we're not having as productive of the cow. That cow's not going to go into a breeding season as healthy. It may not wean as big of a calf, and those kinds of things. So there may be times of the year where you can lose a little condition and not hurt that cow, but you'd like to maintain them at that body condition score 5. So we want them to have a little bit of fullness in them. So most of the time we do this at calving. Calving is the same. When we body body condition of the cow at calving is the single factor influencing that rebreeding after performance after calving. But other times to body condition score would be in late summer and early fall, especially during a drought. So you know how your cattle are moving through that drought, and if you need to provide supplemental feed or change the nutritional demand of that cow through early weaning. Other times you may want a body condition score would be at weaning and then 45 days after to see how that cow has responded after you have removed that calf. So we talked about how our livestock need to stay in condition for to maintain their condition and to be productive during a drought. And so we have some options to help ensure that our cattle stay healthy and our range stays healthy. And some of those options involve changing our livestock inventory. This is the most economical way to get through a drought. It's pulling cattle or changing the nutritional demand of those cattle. So we can identify those low performing females. We can pull those cows early so we take advantage of higher prices. So we get those pulls to market before the market is flooded. We can lease grass. So we're taking the demand off our grass and we're putting it on somebody else's grass. With a widespread drought, that's probably not possible. But with if we have just a regional drought, maybe taking those cattle to other places is something we can do. Probably not this year. We're having a pretty widespread drought according to the drought monitor, but it's something to think about for future uses. We can early wean cattle or early wean the calves. So we typically can early wean at 45 to 155 days of age. For every 2.5 days a calf is weaned, you gain 1 more day of grazing on the grass on the ranch. So some people may talk about creep feeding your calves. That's not removing the lactation pressure on the cows. And so by creep feeding, you're not gaining any grazing days. By removing that calf, changing the nutritional demand of that cow, we're going to gain some days on grass. And then another way to change your livestock inventory is to keep fewer replacements. So you're not keeping as many replacements. You have less cows for the grass you do have. So there are some cooling strategies just to keep in mind. Don't send open cows or cows without calves to grass. Get rid of those, pull those. Only send cows to grass that are going to have potential to wean a calf. So that's something to start with if you're going into a drought situation and you need to destock. Then you might start to look at those poor mothers or those that have physical or disposition problems. So cows that maybe have a poor udder or are unsound, don't have sound feet, maybe they're just mean and you're tired of dealing with them and it's time to let them go. Even if those meaner mothers provide you with a good calf, sometimes this is a good time to get rid of them, just because you're going to have to get rid of something. You can look at those cows that continually produce calves that are in your lowest 25% of the calf crop you produce. So identify those mothers that consistently wean a low productive calf, and then that's maybe somehow a way you can look at pulling cattle. You may not want to keep as many, I talked about this, you may not want to keep as many replacement heifers. And going back to your physical disposition problems, if you're running older cows, make sure they're sound enough to run for at least 2 years. So if you don't think you're going to be able to keep them for 2 years, maybe it's time to get rid of them a little earlier than you had planned on. And then you can pull after weaning. So maybe that's when you pull your low performing cows. They gave you the calf you need, but it's time to get rid of them since you have to destock anyway. These are really hard decisions to make. Destocking is really hard. These are just some ideas that can help you make your way through that hard decision, help you identify the best places to pull those animals. And of course, your bulls, you don't want to keep any bulls that aren't performing the way you want them to perform. So there's options for how we use our existing forages. Mitch talked a little bit about that rotational grazing system. And a rotational grazing system is a great way to be flexible in your system and to be able to hold grass over for a drought. So maybe you conservatively stock, you rotate some of your pastures, you rest. And so if there is a drought that next year, you're able to, you have grass, you have existing forage to get you through that drought. Or if you have an abundance of grass, maybe you're able to bring in some yearlings so you have a flexible system with that rotational grazing system. You could delay your turnout on your forage and either give that grass time to put production on, or maybe hopefully it rains. We don't know. So you can delay that turnout if you have feed left over or you have feed available to feed those animals. So let those grasses get grown up, get productive, and delay that turnout a little bit. Or you can flip it on its head and do early turnout and take advantage of those cool season grasses that maybe there's enough soil moisture to get them going. They're highly nutritious. You can put some you can put some cattle out there and get good condition on your cattle and then pull them back. Or maybe you graze your meadows early and then pull them off your meadows and put them on your upland grasses. So there's a lot of different ways you can move through your rotational grazing system based on drought conditions, or even when there's not drought conditions. So the other way to look at it, you can also concentrate grazing. So you remember that slide that Mitch had with the GPS collars, and you saw those wider, lighter areas. So those are areas where the cattle weren't really using that grass. If you can use some type of temporary electrical fence to concentrate animals into certain areas, then they can use that forage that they normally may not use, and that may be there available to them because it's carryover, because they didn't use it the last year in a normal grazing system. You have to be careful with that. You don't want to overgraze. So you want to make sure you get enough rest between your grazing events. And in a normal system, in a normal time of year, usually you want a 60 to 90 day rest between grazing events. The faster the grass is growing, the shorter that grazing, that window can be. When they're in a drought, those grasses are growing pretty slow, so that window gets larger. So overgrazing, we don't want to overgraze. We have that 25% harvest efficiency, and we don't want to overgraze. And so we want to leave some for health of the grass, but we want to utilize it as best as we can during a drought. Flash graze is a little bit like I talked about, turning the delayed turnout on its head. So you're grazing fast through those pastures while they're actively growing and getting that highly nutritious grass off, and then taking advantage of quality of forage rather than quantity of forage. Again, we want to avoid overgrazing. And then you also have your options for alternative feeds. This is the most expensive because you're purchasing some feed. But if you have the ability, you could also have those areas where you could plant annual forages, you can take advantage of that. So you plant summer annuals and can graze those or hay them and bale them and have feed. Not everybody has that capabilities, but if you do have those, that's a good option to think about. And then you have supplements for pasture grass. So that's buying supplements, buying hay, buying other types of feed, other types of forage. Protein supplements, a word on protein supplements, they don't inhibit forage intake. So just feeding a protein supplement, while yes, it's going to keep your cow in good condition, it's not going to reduce the forage intake that they're grazing out on your pastures. So you want to supplement energy and then protein if you need it. So you want to fill that room in so they're not grazing the forage on your pasture if you don't have that forage there. Or if you're trying to stretch that forage out, your existing forage. So you want to feed alfalfa hay or some other type of something that's going to fill that room in. And then there's always dry lotting those cows. Just make sure you know what you're doing. You get a good ration. There's a lot of folks out there that can help you build that ration with the university. Extension has some apps and some other things that can help build that ration for you and walk you through how you dry lot a cow. A lot of times you guys probably aren't doing a lot of that. You may not have that information, but it's something to keep in mind if you have the capability to do it. So we talked about some of those different options, and you might have others. So if you have others, you can jump in and let me know. But they're based on our livestock inventory, how we change the inventory of livestock out there. How flexible is our livestock inventory? Did we go into the year with a flexible herd where we're able to pull animals, or we have a yearling herd where it's easy to get rid of them besides our cow herd? Those kinds of things. Changing our livestock inventory is probably some of the hardest decisions we have to make during a drought, but it's probably the most economical, and it's something that may be necessary. And then we have options based on how we use the existing forage out there. Do we turn out early, or do we delay turnout? Do we concentrate our grazing? Do we flash graze? There's different things you can do. And as the task force and putting together your rotational grazing plan, that's something I can help you with and help you decide what forages you have in your inventory and your livestock inventory and how those can mesh together. And then the supplemental forages, the ones we always think about, buying those forage, buying that hay, providing any type of supplement. That's amazing. So does anybody have other ones?
You know, some people out there will have the pasture set up where they drink for like 2 days
and move. Yep, so that's flash grazing.
And they'll move them again, and they'll come back.
Yeah. So you just want to, when you do that, you just want to make sure you have enough rest for recovery between those grazing periods. So when the grass is growing fast, you can move through them faster. And if it's growing slow, you need to give it more recovery time. But yeah. So when those grasses are green, really green, it's very high quality feed. As they mature, you get more production out there. They've grown more leaves or whatever. That's higher production. So you have a trade-off between quality and production, and those can help you make your decisions based on your goals. So it's all based on, which I'll talk about now, which is how you develop your drought plan. So now we want to make the plan. We're going to take what Mitch taught us about how to define and look at drought and predict drought, and then we're going to take some trigger dates, and we're going to take those different management options, your menu of management options, and tie them together into a drought plan. This is taken directly from Mitch's slide with the brown slide with the columns and the rows. I did combine a couple things, but it's pretty much directly that slide. So we want to identify our partners and establish communication first. So it's really important that everybody is at the table that has an involvement in that ranch when you go to make your drought plan. And we want to write it down. So have somebody there that can write notes while you're talking, or have it recorded or something, because it's really important to make sure every voice is heard and everybody has buy-in. And maybe it's a small operation and it's just you and your wife. Maybe it's a large operation and it's your siblings or your kids or your cousins, however it works. You want to identify your objectives and ranch goals, because that's really going to play into those management decisions, those options you choose. So my goals for, if I had a ranch, would be different than Shelley's goals, because we're different types of operations out there. And it's really, so my management decisions that I choose, you know, are going to be different than Shelley's. And that's also because those management decisions are going to be different because of inventory of resources. So what type of cow herd do you have? Is it all yearlings, or do you have a cow-calf herd? Do you raise horses? You know, those different inventory resources. Do you have hay meadows, sub-irrigated hay meadows? Do you not? Do you have areas where you can plant annual forages or not? So you want to inventory those resources. You want to understand drought and what drought means to you and to your operation. Listening to Mitch, we have kind of a better idea of how drought affects plants and how it can affect our operations, and how we can define drought based on what we know about precipitation in our grasses that we have out on our property. And we're going to monitor. We're going to use those tools Mitch gave us and monitor for drought, and that can help us decide when our trigger dates are going to be. And what we know about forage production and those grass growth curves, and to identify our critical dates, which is step number 6. And critical dates are going to vary based on your operation. I'm going to go through a couple different ways to think about that. And then we're going to identify those management decisions or those strategies. Take the menu of strategies that you have, and maybe that's something you do when you start your communication. You list out all the different strategies that are available to you. And so you have a menu of strategies. But we're going to talk about those. We want to have a plan for before, during, and after drought. So before drought, we have our rotational grazing system or some type of a plan. And then after drought, we also want to not just, those grasses are going to have time to recover. As Mitch showed, those after 2012, those warm season grasses took a while to recover. So our grazing is probably going to have to change a little bit while those grasses are recovering. So we don't want to leave that out of the plan. And then, of course, you're going to monitor that and evaluate it every year. So we put it all together. I took those same dates that Mitch gave us and kind of went through just a basic thing, what you could do. So on April 1, we can inventory what our current grass looks like. And he talked about that. Was it dry last year? How much carryover do we have? And what is our livestock resource? What does our cow herd look like? And then we might want to review our drought plan if we already have one. If you've already made one, awesome job. But you might want to review that to make sure it still fits within your operation and make any changes. Maybe there's some new things you've thought of, or maybe there's just you've made some contacts, and so you have more resources available to you for additional feed or for other things, and so you need to make those changes to your drought plan. And then May 15th, we're getting close to that time. Might be time to start implementing that drought plan. You know it's dry, and maybe for you guys it's before that. Maybe it's in April if you're like, I got to start implementing my plan. So it just depends on your operation. Maybe it's time to review the management decisions and make those decisions. And then June through July, you're going to be monitoring that grass growth, the precipitation amounts, and you're going to be executing those management plans you choose on those during that trigger dates or during that period of time. And then I put an end on July 15th, but you should really keep planning further out. Because sometimes there's winter grazing. If you've winter grazed, are you going to have enough forage for winter grazing? Are you going to have enough winter feed? During dry conditions, your meadow hay production may be lower. So are you producing enough feed for the cattle you have for winter? Do you have a place to take those cattle in the winter for for that time. So it doesn't end on July 15th. It just, that's usually where we where we know our grass is fully grown. That's where our production level has stopped. But we still got to plan for once we raise the production we do have out there, what are we going to do after that? Here's kind of a sample drought plan with actual management decisions in it. I made this up. It's not based on a ranch. It's just based on kind of some of the things I've seen. It's probably not going to work for you. I don't want you to take this and just use it on your ranch. You can use this outline by by all means, but make sure it fits your ranch. We're going to review our drought plan on January 1. So yeah, we may be having good forage production and we may be having a wet winter, but it can turn off at any time. So we're going to do our review on January 1. We're going to get together with our team, and review that plan, and then make any changes to that plan that we may need to make. And then on April 1st, we can evaluate where our grass is, our carryover grass is low. Maybe we did some winter grazing and we used up some of our forage. So we're gonna, and this may be when you do this already, we're just gonna cull our open and problem cows. We're not gonna get anything ready to send to grass that's open. And then on May 1st, the drought conditions are occurring like it is now. This operation is going to delay its turnout and feed some hay and maybe flash graze the meadows with some of the cattle. This would be a time if you had the capability to plant annual forages. This may be the time to start thinking about that based on when you want to graze those. And then June 1, those drought conditions are persisting. This operation is going to implement some concentrated grazing and then really pull those low performing cows and get rid of those cows. And then on July 1, we're still in drought. We still don't have forage. We're pretty much done with forage production for the entire year. Cows are starting to lose condition. So we're going to wean those cows early and move those cows to that planted annual forage, and then supplemental feed as needed. That's the drought plan. It's going to be different. I don't know if anybody wants to share what they kind of do, but you're more than welcome to.